Okay, I'm going to pick up where I left off at the end of the previous video, where we talked about the effects of native applications not being built on the CSS paradigm. There I told you the following. To inspire you, I advanced quickly in my KB so that you can see in this emulator how the screens of the Android application for phone look like. For example, we see the hamburger menu on the left, as is the standard in their operating system, and not on the right as proposed by Chechu's design. We see as title in the application bar the name of the object being loaded. And not this icon and text that I'll show you later how to change in the simplest way. Note that in the attractions panel, I removed the header as indicated in the design, and that for now, I implemented the carousel as a horizontal grid to make it quick and easy. And that if I tap on an attraction, it takes us to the attraction panel, and automatically, and also according to the operating system's own mechanisms and Android's design guides, the back button appears to return to the object that called it. The panels are exactly the same as the ones we used for the Angular desktop application. But of course, I defined another layout for each one, this time for any phone, so that it's also valid for iPhone. There we can see the four layouts. I only had to add two objects to the UI. This one, which will be the menu and entry point of the application, and this stencil that competes with the master panel. Why do I say competes? Because native applications ignore the master panel property and the referenced object, of course. They don't take it into account. And that's why I had to insert in each of the panels that had this header, the stencil that designs it. Thus, while the menu and the header were included for Angular Desktop in the master panel object, for native applications, we have no choice but to include the header as a stencil in each of the layouts if we want to reuse it. Or otherwise, as a component. But in principle, for our case, it wouldn't be necessary. Later on, we'll see what happens with the menu. In the stencil, I have the canvas with the variable for the image, the table that works as a mask, and the variable for the title. Where did I define the style of its classes? If for Angular Desktop, I had done it in the DSO with the same name as the master panel, here I created a parallel one and called it that way. And here I defined the properties of the header, and also those of the menu that we'll see later. The H1 is in the base DSO for phone, and will have these characteristics. All those coming from the travel agency base DSO with these changes here. However, we'll have to see if all these properties apply to the native world. As I told you before, not all CSS properties will. In fact, for the moment, text transform with uppercase value will not work. Note that I get it to be capitalized because the content of the variable is capitalized on all screens. Here we see how I loaded in the client start these two variables of the header only if Angular is not running. And it's not really the break we'll want to make, because for the sake of transversality, we'll want to use the same solution for Angular of this window size. But for now, it doesn't matter. We see that the title is entered in uppercase. And if I go now to see the title for attraction, which is taken from the database, so I don't know if it's capitalized there, I force it to be capitalized with this method. Note that I added to the data provider that we had used for the desktop application, and that returned the attraction data, the values of attraction photo and attraction name, which we didn't load at that time. I will show it explicitly so that there are no doubts that this CSS property is not being applied. I'll uncomment it in case you doubt that it's being taken correctly from the travel agency base. And at the same time in that DSO, I'm going to change its color to make it pink, so that you can see that this is not the problem because it does take the properties that come from there. And the other thing I'll do is modify this here so that it's in lowercase. My main object is the menu, so that's the one I'm going to run. Well, that should have made it clear, shouldn't it? Before we go on, I want to show you that the way to specify that this color is the color of the application bar, and that this white is the color of the text and of the hamburger icon, and that for editable fields, this is the color of the cursor, is through these properties specified at the application class level. Only this class will understand them. You can find the complete information in the Genexus wiki. It corresponds to definitions from the Android and Apple design guides. So how did I implement the hamburger menu? We have two aspects at play. One, implementing the menu itself, and two, getting it to behave as a hamburger menu. I did the first thing using a panel object with a table with the 6 buttons. I associated a class with this table with the background color I want. And to the buttons, I associated the same 2 classes that we used in the Angular desktop application. I copied the menu label here and removed it from travel agency base phone. But here there are also some differences. For example, this CSS property that we use for the button to have the same width as its content doesn't work here. In addition, by default, all button captions will be capitalized. So I use the text transform property so that they're not capitalized. Indeed, here the text transform property will have an effect, but with this value. In summary, some CSS properties are valid for native exactly the same. Others are valid but for other values, and others are not valid at all. The aim of Genexus is to gradually remove all these differences so that the use of properties is as cross-cutting as possible. So I have this object that will act as a menu. That's why I have to specify it as main object. It'll be the entry point of the application. This will be the one that will be compiled and uploaded to the store when the whole application is ready. I could have used, instead of an ordinary panel object, an object of menu type, which already has the semantics. Since it's less flexible, I chose a panel, which gives me all the flexibility. But how do we get this object to act as a hamburger menu? If we use the native solution of the mobile device's operating system, which in the case of Android displays the menu on the left, it'll be very simple. It's enough to indicate that the navigation style for the platform is slide. This is what I indicated for Android phone. The default value is flip. Of course, to test everything as I'm showing it, I had to turn on for the front end the generation for Android and temporarily turn off the generation for Angular. Doing this automatically opens the emulator when running. Perhaps before we go any further, it's worth clarifying something about the platforms. If I'm running the native application on an Android phone, the properties indicated here will be taken into account. For example, the DSO and the navigation style. But which layout will be selected from the ones specified in each panel? The one whose characteristics are closest to those of the device I'm using. So, if I'm running on an Android phone, a panel with these 4 layouts, which one will it use? This is not chosen at runtime, but when the application is compiled. Clearly, it will use any phone. If, on the other hand, the application was running on an iPhone, this layout would be chosen. And if a web application is running on either Android phone or iPhone, it'll be this other one. If we only had the any platform layout for a panel, in any case, it would run this one. If you've never prototyped a native development from Genexus, I recommend watching this video of our Genexus for Mobile course. In fact, I recommend watching the entire course, which is quite short. In particular, here you'll be able to expand this for the navigation styles. Precisely, as you can see there, I had to use the slide.start event in order to indicate which object to open when executing the main object that will act as a menu. When the navigation style is slide, precisely. I also recommend watching this other video that will be very useful to see the different possibilities for invocations. For example, in the next video, we'll see a possible manual implementation of the hamburger menu on the right. It won't end up being useful for this particular functionality, but it will be useful in general for opening windows from the right when the navigation style is split screen. Throughout the course, I kept saying that for accessibility reasons, all actions should be implemented as buttons. That's why I showed you this menu with buttons. But in fact, the one you saw running is not this one, but this other one with text blocks instead of buttons. The solution with buttons looks like this. That is, as I couldn't make the buttons have the width of their caption, and I can't set the caption to be aligned to the left, I have no way to align their text to the left. This will be fixed in the future. Now, look at this text that is loading by default in the application bar. It's taken from the caption property of the panel. I'm going to remove it for you to see. And I'm going to remove it also from the attractions one, but not for the other two. Let's run it. For contact, on the other hand, great. If now we want the application bar to display an image, then we can use this property in the application bar's class. This is the name of the image that I took from Figma and inserted in the KB. Since it's white, we don't see it. But what I did, as you can imagine, was to export it from Figma. If we run it now, we see it in all panels. Something I didn't show you is that the application bar's class is the one we can see associated with the panels through these properties. Of course, buttons can be placed to be displayed right there or as context menus. In the next video, we'll revisit this and see how to add a button to the application bar with the image of the hamburger menu and how to make the menu appear to the right.